recent times Mauritius, Singapore, and as we speak, we are hearing and witnessing a lot of onshoring of funds as well in IFSC GIFT City. As of December 2023, I think IFSC published statistics. There are already 95 fund managers which have set up shop in IFSC. So that's the new one on the block. We'll talk about that as well. And it will be good to get perspectives from all three of you, what you are seeing in this area. So let's start off by, I think I would just request each of you to just describe so that everyone's aware, what you are doing currently in terms of your fund role in your respective organizations, and then we can kick off from there. So maybe Shivani, Kalpesh.
Let's start with the man.
Maybe good that I'm in the minority over here, so I should start.
That's your lucky
Yes. Okay, so we at Multiples actually raise money from international investors and domestic institutions, and also retail investors. So we have all three possible combinations, which means that we have to deal with possibly offshore fund and India funds who get regulated, whether any offshore location or possibly gift, and in India with SEBI. That's the structure. We are into fourth fund, and while we talk later, I'll explain you how our transition is well, that how we move from an offshore location to back in India as regulation changed.
Hi, this is Nimisha from Six Sense Ventures. Just a little bit quickly on the fund so that you get the context to the conversation that will follow on later. So we are a consumer-centric fund in our 10th year journey. We are $500 million in size, and we dabble across all the consumer aspects, whether it's B2B or B2C really. We are 3 funds old, soon to launch our 4th fund next week really. And largely, we are actually India's largest consumer domestic fund in the country. So our LPs are having HNIs, family offices, institutional investors, insurance companies, and with the 4th fund, we are going to dabble into getting offshore capital into, and we're very glad to share some insights into how we went about choosing the right jurisdiction to do that.
Thanks. So probably I'm the odd one out over here, because when everybody talks about homegrown, we are not. We are a global fund, and we don't have any local investors. We have institutional investors. So we basically have 2 funds where we manage $100 billion of third-party LP money, which is formed of large institutions, but a lot of sovereign wealth fund money. And then our second fund is atypically a proprietary fund. So it's more like just managing SoftBank money internally, and it has been very amazing navigating through the tax challenges across both of them, because the requirements of what multiple LP owned but still sovereign wealth, so if you have only 10 LPs, what the challenges are with that as compared to when you are a proprietary fund but you've got the global outlook, they are completely different. So it's been very interesting looking at all of that and talking to various regulators and explaining things to lots of tax authorities on why we do the things that we do. So, and a lot of that has actually influenced the kind of investments that we make as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shivani. So I think you're not the odd one out. It's good to get a different perspective from all three of you. I think there are completely diverse areas, and we're glad to hear each of your perspectives. So Kalpesh, starting with you. So you have been, Multiples has been a veteran in this fund, the PE fund in India, and you just closed your 4th fund. So can you just highlight what has been your experience in terms of how LPs look at this entire topic of fund jurisdiction, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Yeah, so for LPs, I think there are 3 important things once they have decided which fund to invest, whether they like the strategy and everything. The moment it comes to selection of jurisdiction, I think the first most important thing is that whether the jurisdiction is efficient in terms of regulations and taxation for them. I think they would definitely look at that as a structure. Second is minimal reporting for them, while they all want to report what is required, but not get into too much of reporting with regulators is a second aspect they would want to get. And third important aspect which never get used but in fact it is looked at is the whole dispute resolution in that jurisdiction, how robust that is. Are they really comfortable if that situation arises? Possibly this happens maybe half in 100 times possibly. But this is a very important clause, and LPs have got comfortable in India also after a very long time. So that becomes a critical aspect as a base for anyone across jurisdiction. But when you talk this with the GP requirement, the GP ones know that they have got a solution around all these three, which location works the best for their investor. The GP will try to look at is there a flexibility in the jurisdiction to invest in the kind of assets they are looking at? Are there restrictions of FDI, FPI, or is my money called as a domestic money in India or not? I think that becomes a one very important discussion. Second would be, again, I would say, what are the tax consequences both for a bunch of LPs put together and for the GP, whether direct or indirect. And in India, there are various regulations around indirect tax, direct tax, again, complications around it. So that again becomes a very, very important aspect any GP would look at. And third, again, for GP as well, to look at a sort of a jurisdiction where they are located is important. That where is the significant part of the team which is located would be their preference point which would be there. I think once you have solution for all this, you will get an answer with a combination of set of investors. A lot of times you may not have an option at all. If you have a retail investors in India, direct you have to go to domestic AIF. But if you have an offshore investor, you could evaluate having a offshore fund or a gift fund. What has happened over a period of time is starting from let's say 2010 onwards, I think a lot of foreign money was raised in India through Mauritius or Singapore route because there was a treaty benefit. 2017 onwards, the treaty benefit went away, so the LPs still continued in that jurisdiction because they were not very comfortable to come directly into India. So there was a sort of a master feeder structure which was created where they were sitting in that jurisdiction wherever Mauritius or Singapore, and then that fund used to invest into India. That was a combination which happened. I think that got eased out with GIFT City coming in, and now the investors are comfortable to come directly into the GIFT City. Again, there are advantages which are there for GIFT City and investors. So that's a phase which I think most of the funds have gone in last 15 years, I would say, depending on their composition of LPs, what it would be. But this has been also multiple journey that we used to have a Mauritius fund, we moved to a master feeder over a period of time, then we now have a GIFT City fund and an India fund. That's a combination, I would say, as a history of multiples, if I have to look at fund jurisdiction.
So follow-on question, if I may ask Alpesh, you've had a combination of both foreign institutions, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and you had a good domestic base as well in all of your funds. So with that background, you have transitioned from this journey with recently being in GIFT, so if you can just highlight for the audience the 3 or 2 key differences in each of the jurisdictions based on this kind of an investor background, because we have a mix of both.
Yeah, I think on this part I can talk about for a good 5 hours, but I think we have a lunch just after this, so maybe in just 2 minutes I can explain is that now virtually there is no difference on GIFT City and offshore funds. It's almost the same. So if you are a domestic or an Indian GP and you have a foreign offshore investor coming in, I think I would say in long and short of it, I think there's a combination of, or I would say the choice of a GIFT City fund makes complete sense, assuming that is a significant or at least a decent portion of your fund size for any GP. So that's I would say. But if suppose you have only or you have a combination of with an offshore investor with an Indian investor coming into it, Indian investors can't invest in offshore fund or a gift fund, so you have to have them in domestic fund, which means you would have sort of restrictions which because it's more of a retail investor friendly jurisdiction, which means that you lose a competitive edge across vis-a-vis a global fund there will be a restriction that you can't take leverage. There is a restriction that you can't do a co-investment within the fund. So various restrictions will come in, but I think as a combination, you have to really work on what best would work, and people have just transitioned over a period of time with these differences.
Great, thank you. Shivani, we'll move to you from that, multiples having a lot of domestic and foreign LPs, focusing on your perspective on what do you see being in the mindset of European LPs or global LPs when they look at new fund jurisdictions and your experience around that.
So a lot of very similar factors actually. So in my mind, like the top three factors which LPs usually want are, they want first of all economic and political stability, right? Because they don't want to be in a volatile jurisdiction. And for example, in a year like this, that's very important with like elections pretty much in every large democracy in the world. So that's one important. The second is they are also looking at, it could be an onshore jurisdiction, it could be an offshore jurisdiction, but what is the, as I call it, the infrastructure or platform that's available? So do you have a good supply of administrators, lawyers, accountants? Are you able to, if needed, hire good investing talent there? Or if it's not going to hire investing talent there, how are you going to create a structure so that you can have a GP stroke manager who is going to service all of that? And the third, as Kalpesh explained, you need a very strong legal and tax background, tax with infrastructure or web of things, because they want to have the ability to be able to get the money out quickly. If there is any changes that need to be made, they want that to happen. So those are, in my mind, like the top things that any global investor is going to look at.
Got it. So I think Kalpesh spoke, you spoke. So let's just dive into that question. That what is the role of tax really when it comes to jurisdictions? What do you see your LP, all of these LP, you spoke about all sovereign funds, being LPs there, and they have PE heads, tax heads. What is their ask?
So role of tax is tax decides the structure. Let's just put it out there. Sorry guys, it's in my control. But in terms of what is it that they're looking at, if you very simply think about it, somebody's putting the money in, they have two key requests out of you. One is, don't make me pay additional tax either in my country or in your country, any other country where we are investing in, just because I've invested in you. So do whatever you have to do in order to make sure that I am either tax neutral. So whether that means that they qualify for an exemption or they get the right credits wherever they have to get. And the second key aspect, again something that Kalpesh talked about, is don't make me file or report or have to comply with extra regulations, tax, legal reporting stuff just because I have invested in your fund. You manage all of that. So what you need to do is you need to then design a structure which is able to give them that tax neutrality, for want of a better word, and you also need to be able to say that, okay, no additional filing obligations generated. But then at the end of the day, those are like the high level things. But then other things which you need to think about is, okay, what is it that the fund is going to do? Because is it a domestic fund? Is it going to invest in one country, one geography, or is it a global fund? If it's a global fund, that's when SPVs come in, right? You need to start creating platforms so that you are able to get access to better investing places. That's where like the tax treaties and etc. come in. Is yours an equity fund or is it a credit fund or a debt fund? Because both of those requirements are completely different. What stage of investing are you doing, right? Where's your stack? Are you going to be at seed or growth? Or are you actually looking at more like hedge fund where you're investing in the public market, right? And then there comes the GP aspect, like, when the GP then starts telling you, you have to structure something so that my employee incentive plans work. I mean, then the good luck trying to match all of that together. So those are the various asks that you have from the LPs, that is what they want to look at.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Nimisha, if I can move to you. I think Sixth Sense has gone through a journey. You had a large domestic base, and that's what your fund has done, retail investors. But now you see moving to foreign LPs, institutional LPs. So if you can describe for the audience again, what has that journey been and how has the decision-making process been for you to move into the concept of fund jurisdictions?
Uh, a lot of inputs from my left and right really. So correct any feeder vehicle, matlab it's like I think it's, if you ask me, it's very evolutionary in a homegrown fund. So we are a homegrown fund really. We started our journey 10 years back with a corpus of 100 crores where we had just HNIs and family offices investing in us. From there, the most recent fund that we just finished, which is our third fund, was a 2,500 crore fund. As the fund performs, you have LPs or potential LPs automatically showing interest into wanting to invest in the space that you dabble in. So the consumer space has been very interesting for international LPs. One, because it's a very resilient space. And second is India is a booming consumer market. So almost 3 years back when we were doing our third fund is when we actually saw the international LPs interest really coming in and realized that the expectations of international LPs is very different from your domestic LPs, which is family offices and even institutions for that matter. The local LPs really would know you first of all because you've been around, they've heard of you, they know the teams well, they know your investment thesis. So that expectation is very well set. So as long as you communicate effectively, you send your quarterly statements, you explain your investment progress periodically, quarterly to them, the local LPs, the domestic LPs are all happy and content with the way the process goes during the fundraise. Now comes that phase where one wants, international LPs have started showing interest and one wants to then look at a feeder vehicle for wanting to take them on board. So as a team, we started discussing this 6 to 8 months back and realized that the first port of honestly approach was, say, Mauritius, right? It's been there for so many years. Funds are used to the Mauritius domain. LPs are used to that domain. There are administrators who can manage the work for you out there. So for a GP, what is important is that how does my process also remain simpler as well as doesn't get too complicated for me because I'm only used to local money, right, over here. Thought about Mauritius and initially all the right things looked fine. But also at the same time, and I'm sharing this is not technical really, this is more process driven, who did not get very great feedback about the serviceability of administrators over there. The policy framework was a bit shaky and the grey list, etc., made us feel that let's keep Mauritius aside, and GIFT City has evolved over the last 4-5 years. So we moved on to exploring GIFT City as a structure vehicle. The GIFT City, I think, according to me, has 3 years back, whatever I had researched on GIFT City, and today when we research, has really evolved to what Kalpesh just explained to us. A lot of funds have come into GIFT City. It's become a truly international structure. As a GP, the first thing one wants to also look at is comfort of the LPs, but at the same time, does this commercially make sense for me? So the tax holidays as well as the GST service tax exemptions that one gets in GIFT City really lends to the GP having that kind of a thing to tell the LPs that yes, GIFT City is going to be cheaper for you as compared to any other domain that one would want to look at. So with that intent in mind and the teams being closer to home, GIFT City just was one of the most preferred vehicle that we concluded as a fund. They also gives the option of a unified structure where we have the main entity AIF here in India and the feeder vehicle in GIFT City would invest directly into the main entity over here. And GIFT City also provides for a co-investment option where one can replicate and do like a mirror image and get the co-investment vehicle out there to invest in all the companies that the mother company over here would invest. So there is flexibility, there is an international infrastructure in place. Your teams are slightly closer to home than somebody sitting in Mauritius and managing your fund. Really. So all in all, GIFT City seems to be a more viable option is what we feel to get into. I think Mauritius is more traditional in that sense.
So follow-on question, Nimisha, what was the reaction of your LPs when you decided to go to GIFT City?
So this is something that we've decided internally, but our fund just gets launched next week. So that is when
So
we
you know
go
the
out to
outcomes.
international LPs and kind of see. But I think in our mind, and because the likes of multiples and a lot of others have already experienced, I think the international LPs are very well settled in their mind because there is no exposure to any Indian tax laws as such. Don't need a PAN card, and as long as the rest of the process, like Shivani also mentioned, just means tax neutrality. They don't have to get into too many complications of reporting. It sounds like a more doable option.
Got it. Thank you. Kalpesh, I'll go to you for the next, a little bit more specific on tax and regulations. What have you seen regulators responding to the needs of fund management today, like be it SEBI, IFSC, you have experienced all of it. And then I'll come to you, Shivani, for a similar question, but from the overseas perspective. So, what do you see has been their perspective? How easy or difficult have they been, in their opinion?
So, GIFT is actually a new baby on the kid, so we don't know what really happens. At least as of now, the signals are good that it's a very friendly jurisdiction. I have not seen regulators being as friendly, saying, okay, if there are any issues, then how we can address it. They have a timeline for clearing any applications which is sitting with them. There are a lot of tax advantages, as Nimisha mentioned, about GST, tax exemptions, income tax exemption for GP. So, and also friendly in terms of having a substance. Technically, as of now, it's about a two people location, and you can manage your fund over there, which is there. Contrast to that, when you look at SEBI, AIF, there are multiple issues, be it on GST on profit share of the GP, income tax issues which would be there in various forms. While it has its own advantages of you get a domestic money status, uh, uh, which is there, but I feel in a longer run, I think maybe in 5 to 7 years we'll know what really happens at GIFT City. Everyone's just about confident about it that there should not be any such issues of tax flip-flops or regulation changes comes up there. There is a confidence of it, saying that the GIFT City thing started in the first regime of this current government, and now it's going into the third regime, possibly, most likely. So I think it should become a very stable structure as such, and that's the reason international LPs are also getting quite a lot confident with that. But with SEBI, as such, there are a lot of regulations and changes which are being there, which is impacting the AIF overall business as well. Like a last regulation which said that banks, if they are LPs in your fund, and if suppose they have exposure in the portfolio company, then you can't invest in that fund, and you have to write off all the old investments. So this was an issue which came up through RBI, but it impacts quite a lot with for AIF. SEBI came up with saying that all the units in the AIF now need to be in a demat form, which actually added a lot of burden on AIF industry, fund managers again. That's been again a new addition. There's a whole lot of norms which came on valuations. While everyone been following that norms, but it's now been made more stringent, more reportable. Exceptions have to be given. So this is a transition which is going on, which when you compare all this with any other jurisdiction, you feel I think it's better to be in an offshore location, or possibly as of now, GIFT City looks to be good. But if you, as I said earlier, that if you have domestic investors, you only have an option to be in India through an AIF structure.
Got it. Shivani, your perspective on overseas regulators?
Yeah, so I wouldn't feel so disappointed about the harshness of the SEBI regulators and the changes and the transition, because that is global. Like the regulators in general are the most archaic systems, and they are more difficult, and for good reason, because you're managing public money, so they have to be difficult. If they are too easy, then there's a problem over there, right? But in terms of how easy or difficult we're seeing is, normally what we find is with either offshore regulators or even onshore. So for example, we do a bunch of stuff in Singapore as well. And I'm talking about this not just from the perspective of where the fund jurisdiction is, but a bit more expanded because one of our funds is regulated in Jersey, but we have asset managers which are regulated across 8 jurisdictions. So we talk to the regulators from an asset manager perspective as well. And what I've seen is where you've got a simple, straightforward fact pattern, everything is going well. And you'll probably work with speed as well, depending on how your advisors are. Where it starts getting tricky and challenging is where you want to then add something else to the mix. So for example, if you've got a regulated fund with third-party LPs and a non-regulated fund with just proprietary capital, what's going to happen to the asset manager? That's where they start raising certain questions. Then if, for example, you started off by saying I'm only going to do private, but you want to make some changes to say now I want to do something public as well. Completely different every set of requirements. Everything else may be ready, but the regulator is not going to give you any approval. What happens when your key people, so your CEO, your IC, etc., because all of those are also registered people, what happens when they start changing their roles a little bit? Because as people evolve, they don't want to do just one thing, they want to do multiple things. You're going to do multiple things, how are you going to put your focus across this? And it starts becoming challenging. And then you have to go through that process in multiple territories. So there's always a lot of, anytime you want to change anything, expect that it's going to be difficult, it's going to take long, add 6 months to the project plan. It's just inevitable.
So any new or evolving regulation that has been particularly challenging for the firm or for the LPs?
I haven't come across any regulation for setting up a fund. But set up your fund, set up your organization, but there are a few new regulations which are becoming challenging more in terms of disclosure. So all of the ESG related regulations, it's great when your fund is really focused on ESG and you're able to actually demonstrate that we have ticked all the boxes. But if not, then you've got a lot of reporting to do around that, and you've got to have a team which works on that so that you're pulling out the information and then you're collecting information not just on the fund but the underlying portfolio companies in order to provide that. That is difficult. The second other difficult thing that we are seeing is, FATCA, CRS, which is like common reporting standards. And simply data collection exercise, I don't think anybody anywhere has done anything with that information. So it's just so onerous on people to do that. And similarly from a tax perspective, the minimum tax rate, global minimum tax, which is driven by the base erosion and profit shifting rules. Similarly, because we are owned by Japan in terms of one of our funds, the BEPS regulations are going to mean that we're probably going to have 5 different sets or layers of accounts to prepare because there's different reporting required. We're going to have at the SPV level, one type of reporting, then at the fund level another type. For tax provisioning you prepare something else, for consolidation you have something else, and then because the BEPS rules are completely different, you have something else from a BEPS perspective. It's extremely onerous, and any objectives that were set that this would bring more harmonization, it's not actually doing that. I don't know what you guys have seen with that.
I think there's one thing to definitely keep in perspective, that the AIF industry has grown almost 7 to 8x in the last 10 years. So there's a huge role that SEBI plays in this, especially when an industry is booming as fast as this, right? SEBI does, as a regulator, play a role and has brought about tight controls and changes, whether it is the PPM being audited every year or the monthly reporting being made more stringent. The idea is to keep a hold on what AIFs are really doing. So that basic level of controls, I feel, for any regulator is definitely has to be done and has to be in place. But like Kalpesh mentioned also, that there are a few elements that really become a little bit of a business restriction when clarity is not given. So I feel what SEBI really needs to do is ensure that there is constant engagement with the industry bodies on a couple of these concerns which are really coming in the way of, like to name one of them, and Kalpesh will remember this, which was kind of a big pain point for everyone, is the co-investment part of LPs that they would do with the fund was being termed as needing a PMS registration. Now that was just absurd, because then an AIF had to get into a PMS registration domain also in order to just provide something as simple as a co-investment opportunity to its LPs. So a couple of things like these become slightly more restrictive for an instrument and an industry that is growing as fast as the AIF industry out here. So as long as SEBI keeps pace to dealing with the IVCA on all the aspects that need clarity on a more regular basis, I think that is what is required out of them.
So maybe just adding on to that, I mean, all of this is important when it comes for the fund manager to select the right jurisdiction, but what's your experience when it comes to ongoing matters? There are ongoing regulatory filings, compliances, tax scrutiny, so any comment on that?
Yeah. So I think the level of information now which is being asked by SEBI has gone almost 3 times in last about 24 months. The level of data tracking again which is happening at a fund level by way of reporting which is happening. They have put a system and tool to track. Apparently, I've heard that your demat units with AIF are now being linked back to your demat units in investments where you have done to figure out inflows and outflows, taking that data from custodians and everything as a check at a global level, as an inflow and outflow. So the level of reporting has become cumbersome. The cost has effectively also increased, and obviously, if you are in a business managing someone else's money, you need to really be almost like 100%, sure on all the compliances. So that has added possibly a lot of things. Maybe I feel could have been just not being there, while there are certain rules which needs to be there, but can be taken off. I think as Nimisha mentioned about the PMS part of it, now apparently I've been hearing that rules may be eased out very soon, and it be allowed through a vehicle within the SEBI as well. So there's a sort of a reverse turn happening there, which is good. I would say. I think as a collaboration between the industry and SEBI, that's a good sign to see how much it changes. Second has been on this has been a topic which has been troubling a lot of GPs, is on the GST part of it, which is on the I would say the additional return what the GP would gain as a profit share for the what returns it would have given to the LP. Now again, there is a sort of no clarity on it, whether there is a GST applicable, not applicable. I think again a clarity once forever is required. Hopefully in next 2 to 3 years there should be a clarity on that matter as well. So you know exactly how you budget it, if it is there or it is not there in your overall business model. Important whether you can take a credit of it or not, but seems like this matter is going to go on. In fact, this is a global debate across various jurisdictions, but in most cases there is a position being taken whether it's a capital gain, capital receipt, or it's a business income kind of a thing. So which is again a clarity required, I would say.
So
This will be,
yeah.
I would say, all the high level points.
Yeah.
Don't want to get into more details which are pain points, but there are good things as well which are there.
So when it comes to this point, Kalpesh, about the GP clarity, or because that is an important part of GP doing the fund management business, what kind of questions you have seen from LPs when it comes to GPs trying to maximize a little bit of it when they talk about jurisdictions like GIFT has this benefit on GST saving on the fee, etc. So do you see that becoming a pain point or a roadblock with LP discussions?
Not really. I think LPs have been fair that I think this is your share of profit. So that's your money. Now you figure out the most efficient. It should not impact us in whatever ways, and it should not impact the fund. I think that's two things are addressed well. I think then they will look at what is the governance around the whole profit share, how it is distributed between by the GP to its shareholders and everything. That the governance they would check for. Otherwise, I think it should be straightforward. I think it's a pretty now streamlined process, I would say, after having an experience across the globe on this.
Great, got it. I think moving on to another European or non-Indian kind of question. Of late, we've been seeing UAE coming up in quite a bit of discussions with LPs. So, what do you think, Shivani, they're finding attractive there? Have you come across any experience of that?
So, not just UAE, but across all of Middle East, they are coming up with a lot of regimes which are very similar to Gift City, and they have been, like, for example, UAE has had a bunch of regimes for many years. So they are very conducive to setting up fund. They want to set up, they want to create, especially in UAE, in Abu Dhabi, etc. They want to create a replication of Mauritius type model, where where people can come and comfortably set up their funds and have all of the infrastructure available in order to provide that, in order to do that. Um, Regulators, because of how the newness of it all, are still taking a lot of time in order to approve things. Um, uh, but if we think about what is it that they are looking for, so ultimately their goal is that traditionally nobody has gone to the Middle East for these kind of activities. They have been so heavily reliant on oil revenues for for the economy, right? So they haven't been able to grow that kind of talent. They haven't been able to attract international talent. They haven't had the need for any international funds. They've got enough of their own money. They don't need somebody else coming and routing the funds via them. But they are seeing more and more, and especially because of ESG becoming so important, that they can't be 100% reliant just on oil for the next 500 years, right? So they are going to have to diversify. Plus, if they want to give their citizens a better quality of life, and they want to stop a migration of talent from their jurisdictions going away to the US, UK, Singapore, etc., they're going to have to bring some of those opportunities locally. And so their key motivation is to develop the talent, and that's why they are providing a lot of incentives and trying to be very flexible in providing very similar to Mauritius or Gift City kind of models.
Okay. I think I'll ask a rapid fire to each of you. Same question. So quick answers that come to your mind. So what is Kalpesh, starting with you? What is your take on the top two challenges that you have seen in terms of deciding or convincing LPs on new fund jurisdictions?
Yeah, I think basically the inertia, they want to just be comfortable with what they were at some same jurisdiction. So making that change is what is one, and second has been tax, which now I think is now very well addressed everywhere. Whichever ways, wherever you go, it's 10%. Simple. So that's sorted. So I just have one.
Okay. Manisha?
Honestly, not really applicable to me because we're just onsetting onto this journey. But I think eventually, whether it's a domestic LP or international LP, it all boils down to their comfort on taxation and what is it that they take back home, right? So as long as taking back home is neutral, it's really the tax part that will be here.
Same for you.
Of course, the tax has to be there, but in addition, I think it's just the flexibility and the speed of change, whether that particular territory allows it or not. So that's the only other factor that I can think of.
So last question, key ask from the regulator or tax authorities, each of you. If you had one ask, what would it be?
I would just simply say that don't make any more changes. Let's be what
Which
we are.
know is inevitable with now the
I think that's what
election.
would be good. Let's see, hoping that in June
Yeah.
there are only good news, not bad news around that. I think that's what I would say. No more changes. I think we had almost 24 circulars in last 18 months from SEBI. So I think we're just dealing with that shock as of now. So that's what I would say. I think we'll just manage
No more
that much.
changes. Okay.
Just to extend what Kalpesh said, I would say that we need clarity on those circulars also because a lot of ambiguity lies within them. And I generally feel SEBI should be doing very constructive and more regular meetings with the industry bodies.
Mine is maybe a slightly different angle to that is it would be good to see a regulator who wants to encourage something like a sandbox regime. So maybe it could be a special regime where they allow you to come in and play. Like, you want to be creative with it, go be creative. We'll allow you to make changes. You want to switch from one thing to the other. You want to try different types of finances. You want to mix private equity with, some other kind of money. That would be wonderful to see, but I know it's going to be very hard. Like a sandbox and regulators don't really go well together. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nisha, Kalpesh, Shivani, for your guidance and inputs on this topic. I'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions. Then we have maybe time for a couple of them, and then we can break for lunch. Yeah, Tori.
Yeah, so my question is to Kalpesh actually. I just want to understand how you are managing LP's expectation. What I hear as a on a consultancy side that LPs are more comfortable and happy with what SEBI is, issuing. So SEBI is becoming more and more stricter, and that's why in fundraising LPs are getting more comfortable with India as a jurisdiction because there's a strict regulator sitting here on the GP. So how things are getting managed between LPs happier with SEBI, but GPs per se are not okay, not okay per se, or there's a challenge in their business. So how this balance is achieved in your fundraise, and I just want to understand your experience here.
Yeah. So basically, I would say as you get older, you get more experience as a fund as well. The same principle, natural rule which applies. I think LPs would get comfortable by the time you're in the third fund that you have a good governance process system, and I think then they would not really matter of regulations because they would know that this fund manager has a system process. He has a team to get taken care of all of that. There will be no non-compliances whatsoever. No big governance issues. I think then they would get comfortable. Ideally, I would see this kind of discomfort for a first fund because they would not be sure about it, what really will happen. So then they are okay that this tightening will help. Maybe to some extent on second fund, but I think what we've seen is at least in our case from second fund onwards we were comfortable. We never got any questions from LPs on that. What are you doing on SEBI regulations? How are you managing it? So there'll be no such questions. That's what our experience has been.
One more question. Yeah.
Hi, my question is Shivani actually. You mentioned that there are Middle Eastern countries who are trying to ease up their laws a little bit to ensure that the standard of living for especially the youth that is there, be it Saudi Arabia opening and investing into sports or having a lot of global concerts. How does that view them as a regulator? Are they also trying to ease up in the same way by opening up their space for more funds to invest, or for them to invest into more funds to help?
Yes, absolutely. So it's just, and if you take Saudi Arabia as an example, I'm saying this because I've recently spent a week in Saudi Arabia, so managed to see all of the changes that are coming about over there. So what the prince is doing is he's got this whole vision 2030 where they've literally taken every aspect of human life and said, where would we like to be and where we are right now, what are we going to do to bridge the gap, right? And then they are investing their own money and creating lots of different pillars where they actually are bridging the gap. So there's a lot of money being put in towards local investment. They are home growing, they're actually funding local investments, so and bringing in people from all over the place in order to support the growth. So whether that's electric cars, whether that's financial firms, whether that's a Paytm type model, whatever it is, they are literally spending money on that. Now in order to do that, they are going to need all kinds of people, right? So they have to ease up the system. So for example, the religious police has really been quashed in Saudi Arabia. So there are a lot of changes there where it's for people who are non-Arabic, it's a much more pleasant place to live in there. And similarly, they know that hand in hand with that is going to come the ease in the financial system or the asset management system. and they are being more and more open as to how they invest their own money, and they're looking at a lot of different avenues, whether they invest in a third party fund outside, whether they invest in portfolio companies directly, whether they set up joint ventures with everybody. Now all of that evidently has to bring with it or come with a relaxation of how their laws are written, how their regulation is written. They never had a tax system. So now they are introducing a tax system. They only had the tax system which applied to oil revenues, right? So now they are introducing it on. A lot of thought process is going behind it. It's still work in progress. It's not the same as Singapore. But there is a lot of work that is going behind it, with that being the goal, that they want to have third party money come in, even where they have invested into third parties. They want to ask those funds. For example, we have an office in Saudi Arabia, and they have asked us that, can you ask your portfolio companies to come in and actually set up base over here as well? Doesn't have to be the base, but a base, so that we can do more, we can actually grow our ecosystem. So it's becoming a very interesting place to do business with. There is still a lot of maturity, and that's not just with Saudi Arabia, but across the Middle East. There is a lot of maturity that needs to go in there, but yes, slowly, slowly.
I think we are out of time, so please give a huge round of applause for this esteemed panel. Just a second, I would like to request Rema Subramaniam, founder and managing partner at Ankur Capital, to give a vote of thanks to all our esteemed panelists. And that's the conclusion.
Thank you.
Get one group picture as well.
Yes.